Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. This is the series for Bucky Inspired Comprehensivity for understanding and changing the world that we do in association with Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. Today, we are celebrating the life, work, and vision of collaborating for comprehensivity of C.J. Fearnley. So I'm going to make the structure. I'm going to just make a quick introduction. Then I'm going to explain the format, and I'm going to make my presentation, and then other people are going to speak. CJ, like Bucky, was future-oriented. He was focused on making the world better for everybody in the future, just like Bucky. So I think the right way of paying tribute to him, to celebrate his life, is to look forward. We look backward in order to look forward. So I want that to be the theme today. You're welcome to talk about anything about CJ, but I'm going to keep the focus on looking forward of what we can actually do. The stunning thing that Joe told me was when CJ filled out the form for his hospital, and there was a place there for religion/belief. He put comprehensivism. That captures him perfectly. His core project that he worked on since 2019 was collaborating for comprehensivity. Let me tell you about the format today. First, the organizers for 52 Living Ideas and this Bucky project, that is me, Joe, and Maritza, are going to speak first. Rupali is driving, so she won't be speaking today. Then we're going to have organizers from Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society, Sandy and Joanne, who have actually known CJ longer than any of us or us speak. And then we're going to open it up for anybody who wants to speak. That is the format. So let me get started. I'm going to make only three things. I'm going to say three things. I'm going to talk about three encounters I had with CJ. The first encounter, the middle encounter, and the last encounter. The first encounter. And Joe here is responsible for this because Joe had been coming to 52 Living Ideas. And after being here for a couple of months, he told me, look, there is this one person you must meet, CJ. I said, great. I love meeting people who are good. And he says, that is the one person, you know. So on July 4th, 2020, about 2.5 years ago, I wrote my first email to CJ. And it was something really, really interesting. You know, all of us have had the feeling of meeting a long lost friend after a long time. Somebody who was very close to you, and then you've been out of touch with him for a long time. Then you meet him after 10 years or 15 years. And it's as if you've always been together. CJ is one of the first person for whom I felt when I started talking to him that I have known him all my life. Okay, that is very, very odd experience because pretty much every line we took, there was so much commonality as if we had all of that. This was in COVID. He had started the project for collaborating for comprehensivity sometime in 2019. And the way he described it was he said, so firstly, I sent him an email about myself on July 14th, and his response was, I'm impressed at what you've organized in 52 Living Ideas. I love the mix of humanities and science. Kudos. So this gives you another, this is a core characteristic of CJ. He was so positive about everybody. Anything good that he saw, he pointed it out to them. He was very generous in his admiration, his praise for everybody. And then he says, I have been building a vision for what you are calling a community of learners or joint exploration of the world. I'm not sure if my vision is only slightly different from yours or if mine is radically different from yours. I wrote out my vision, which I dubbed Collaborating for Comprehensivism, at this URL. And he says, the project is a bit stillborn because of COVID-19 social distancing guidelines, because I envisioned it as face-to-face events. So this was the first email exchange. And then, of course, we talked. And we realized, this was on July 8th, and we realized that our vision was almost identical. I mean, there is differences we have, but the fact that you have to be a comprehensivist, I had taken that for granted most of my life, so had CJ. Importance of collaborating in order to achieve that, I had taken that as given most of my life, so had CJ. So we started off, at such a level. Within 7 to 10 days, we had planned out the entire plan, and we had up to, let me see, I put it this way. I wrote to him saying that, okay, I have the calendar all booked until the end of September. And so that's how it started. Within like 7 days, he was able to he was able to connect us to everybody. I was able to reach out to them. I was able to schedule all the presentations, and we had it all worked out all the way till the end of September. And that's very typical of collaborating with him. I mean, collaborating with him, there are only like 2 or 3 other people whom I have been able to collaborate so fluidly, so quickly, at such a fundamental level. And then came his meetup, his first meetup. And that just blew me away, because his level of preparation for the meetup, he had this essay. I think the first one was on the great traditions of inquiry and action. And it just blew me away, because the essay itself was so well thought out. It was full of links to all kinds of other material. It was I had not seen that level of preparation. It was like an order of magnitude higher than anything I'd seen. And then he had a plan of doing the meetup, all worked out to the last minute. That was CJ. And then that did not end there. Within a very short time, I think it was about a month or so, he had planned out all his meetups in 2021 and 2022. All the meetups that we're going to do. In my first conversation itself, the thing that I insisted and pushed very hard throughout was that everything that he does on meetups at 52 Living Ideas should move directly towards his book. And he agreed, wholeheartedly agreed with that. So every meetup was actually a facet, a perspective that he wanted to add to his book. So he was working on these 27 essays that would go There would be essays and meetups that would go into his book. So I learned a level of collaboration with him, which was just astounding. So that was my first experience in July of 2020. Now, my middle experience. This came in September of 2021. COVID had gone down enough that I felt comfortable asking CJ if I could go and visit him. And I said I wanted to interview him for his book, because that's what I was relentlessly focused on, getting his book out. And so I went to his home. I think I and Joe were one of the first visitors to his house since COVID started. And he did an interview. And during that interview, he held up this orange book 4 times, The Design Way. And I'm saying, wait a minute, I'm interviewing you about your book. Why is it that CJ is holding up this book? So, okay, I said, okay, I have to find out everything about it. He had done meetups on that before, but I suddenly saw the place of the book in his thought. So I got it on Kindle. I have my Kindle rigged up so it can read to me. So I just inhaled the whole book in about 2.5 to 3 days. Okay, it's a dense book, but the way in which my mind works is that I go through things in multiple cycles. So I finished my first cycle of taking it in within 2.5 days. And I was blown away by it. So I said, okay, we have to do meetups on this. So I told CJ, fantastic, we're going to do meetups on that. And his reaction was, okay, great. It'll need at least 200 meetups. Okay, I said, no. That is not humanly possible to take in a book within that much. It's too sparse. Nobody can manage, information like that. So I had a very odd way of going through the meetups. These 4 things that you're seeing at the back, these 4 tetrahedrons, it's like 4 ways of approaching things, speaking to 4 different kinds of ways in which people approach things. This is something that I had a version of. So I took the book and divided it into spirals, and we went through the book. CJ posted the announcement in the videos, the introductory videos that we are doing about the book on his LinkedIn page. Harold Nelson found out about it. He posted on his LinkedIn, and he himself showed up along with his colleague, Robert. And it was just amazing, and the beautiful thing, again, you see, there's just so much to talk about CJ. He never attended those meetups, but he watched everything. And he had detailed comments on every meetup, every aspect of every meetup, which we could use for the next one. He gave lots of suggestions and everything. And the reason he didn't attend is that he's very structured. Like, I remember telling him, I'm not going to go into this in detail. He did a whole bunch of series on literature, Dante and Dostoevsky and Frankenstein. And I told him, look, I really want to do Faust. He says, yes, let's schedule it for 2024. This was back in 2021. Let's schedule it for 2024. That's when I want to go into Faust, because I have all of these other things that I've planned before that. So it's a very meticulous planner. And so it was amazing. I also recommend you the video that Harold did about CJ very recently. So I would recommend that. Maritza, if you could put it in the chat at some point, would appreciate that. So that was the second encounter. It was amazing. Design Way is a great book, and we had a great community of people coming from all kinds of bases. And Harold kind of watched it as a grandfather, seeing the grandchildren play with his ideas that had kind of, people were playing and learning and growing with his ideas, people from all kinds of backgrounds, and he did not participate actively. He did not participate, he just watched, but he would come for every meetup. It was an amazing experience. So that was the middle one. Now, the last one. And that was, in November 2022. On October 27th, he wrote an email to me saying that, telling me a little bit about the problem. Didn't fully grasp how serious the problem was, but he said that he had a mission. And he says that, let me see here. He says, I'm contacting you to request, he had written something about what he's trying to do. I'm contacting you to request your assistance with my most important ongoing initiative, Collaborating for Comprehensivity. I intend to focus as much of my time as possible over the coming months on this project. And as an important on-ramp to engaging new audiences in Buckminster Fuller's synergetics. My mission for the past 3 years, what began in August of 2019, has been what I'm calling Collaborating for Comprehensivity. It is my highest priority life objective right now. He says, I see the Comprehensivity initiative as the most important immediate concern of my life mission. This is around November 2. And again, in characteristic CJ style, he adds the following. He says, please look at Collaborating for Comprehensivity initiative that I've organized over the past 3 years. Give me your honest critique of its strengths and weaknesses, every nuance of every idea on the site, while written by me, was sourced in others. It is not my static vision, but a product of my collaboration with others, primarily colleagues at Linux Force and Synergetic Collaborative in 2000s, the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society in 2010s, and 52 Living Ideas in 2020s. I could not have formed these ideas without the inputs of others, which my comprehensivity has forged into current definition of the initiative. By the way, in one of the emails, he had sent me his definition of comprehensivism. See, my definition, comprehensivism means comprehending our worlds broadly and deeply. So that is what he started out with. He was planning to send it to a whole bunch of people. He basically took me, Joe, and Maritza into his confidence, and we worked very fast, as we always do with him, because we see eye to eye. There are lots of differences, but differences get resolved very quickly. We put things, he would explicate, okay, this is a way I think it should be done. I would agree with 3 of the things and not with the 2, and I would make my argument. I would propose other things. He was very, very quick in changing. When he saw a point, he would immediately jump and change. So very fast, we were able to come up with this plan, and we launched the initiative. We did not have his permission to talk about his health, so we did not do that when we launched the initiative until the day he gave us the permission. And on that day itself, we launched, we talked about it in one of the Sunday meetups 2 weeks ago. He worked on this to the end. I mean, my most touching thing that I heard from Joe was the person who was in touch with him directly. He said that this was during the last 3 or 4 days of his life. He says he refused to take treatment unless he was sure that his mind would be fully active, because he wanted to finish number 27 of the essays that he had planned back in 2020. That remained the unfinished symphony. But that is the commitment that he had. Then when we were talking about, we were going to do a meetup on the greatest ideas of Buckminster Fuller. And what he did was that he said that, I don't know how much energy I have. I said, don't do anything, okay? You're not expected to do anything. We're just going to take care of it. But he said, no, I have these patches of energy during days. And there is one thing that I want to say, and that's where he provided us with two things, actually. One was this idea of 4 on-ramps to synergetics, which is what we are using to structure all our meetups. We have these 4 different ways. One that is design oriented, which is focused on concrete implementations. One which is based on integrities, which really engages the imagination and intuitiveness. There is one based on what he calls geometries, which looks at the details of the ideas. And the 4th one is on collaborating. And we are actually structuring the entire 2-year program that we have that way. We are planning out 2023 and 2024. He has also given us a list of about 36 people whom he thinks are good thinkers on Buckminster Fuller's ideas. We have not begun to contact them. Several of them have contacted us, and we have already scheduled 4 meetups for January, and we're talking to several people. I'm going to reach out to everybody after this, along with the video of this program, to show what we are planning to do, and I'm going to enlist their help in doing that. So we're going to do about 100 meetups in 2023 and 2024 put together. Just to give you a flavor of what we are starting out with, and everything would be of this quality or more going forward. The first meetup on Jan 8th is going to be on the parallels between Buckminster Fuller and William Blake, looking at their lives, looking at their ideas. That's going to be by Daniel Friedman. Next one on January 15th is going to be by Peter Myson, and he's going to be talking about the idea of synergy. He's going to be introducing the idea of synergy, which is a core idea of Buckminster Fuller. Peter has been in the field for 3 decades with a very wide experience with Buckminster Fuller's ideas. On January 22nd, Rupali Sharma, who's an architect, who started her career building geodesic domes in India, is going to be talking about the inside of the geodesic domes. So that will be the implementation part. The 4th meetup on the 29th of January is going to be by Kirby Erner, and he has an amazing slide deck on dimensions in synergetics that CJ really likes. He said, talk to Kirby and get him to present on that. So we're going to start off with that. So these are the 4 meetups, and I'm going to reach out to everybody, and I'm reaching out to you here. Please reach out to me at 52livingideas@gmail.com. Again, that is 52livingideas, 52livingideas@gmail.com. Please write to me. Would love to have you present. We can do it in multiple ways. We're going to do it as a combination of interview followed by presentations. Interview to make sure that you connect with the audience. We want the idea here that CJ has is that Buckminster Fuller's ideas are useful to everybody. We have to make it accessible to everybody, the deepest of his insights. So it is bridging the gap between deep knowledge of Bucky's ideas and today's culture. That's what we're going to be doing, okay? Please join us in doing that. We will soon be publishing all the 4 meetups for January are already up as titles. We'll be filling that up. We'll be filling up the rest of the calendar for 2023 and 2024. So it's a very long range project. It's not just one meetup. That is correct. Yes. Marty, thank you very much for putting it in the chat. You can copy that. I invite you to do that, and you can write to me at that email address anytime. If you are at part of this meetup, please contact us. If you know people who would like to do that, please reach out to them, because coming from somebody they know, it's going to be more persuasive. And so I'm inviting, it's an open door invitation. It doesn't have to be a long presentation. We can have a presentation where there will be lightning talks. So there's all kinds of formats that we have developed in 52 Living Ideas. Both me, Joe, Maritza are very, very good at doing the, kind of figuring out a structure. So if you have things to say, that's all you need to do. Rest of it, we will handle. All right. So that's what I had. Now we are going to go with Joe, followed by Maritza, followed by Sandy, followed by Joanne, and then we are going to open it up for everybody. So Joe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shrikant, and thank you for hosting this evening as well. Yes, it was just a few weeks ago that we learned that CJ had potentially had cancer, and on October 27th. And then a few weeks later, I'll never forget, I received a text message, and it reads, cancer is already in stage 4, rapidly growing. I have maybe a month to live. And everything just came, my world came down. Because I had thought about, my time with CJ, and I had met CJ around 6 years ago. And, he immediately engaged me and, just asked what I was interested in and what I wanted to learn and what attracted me to the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. And then he started to talk about what he was interested in. And then he started talking about his schedule and how it went out for almost two years. And I had an immediate connection with him. I really did. It was just, he was so welcoming, and it was exactly what I needed at this particular moment in time in my life. I had gone through a really difficult period where I started to lose faith in institutions, and I started to, really wonder if there were any authentic people left in this world. So that was a really difficult place. So I just started attending more and more meetups with CJ. And one thing that became readily apparent is that he had a love for learning, absolute love to learn. And, he would lead topics on physics, on philosophy, he would lead topics on sociology, psychology, and design, and Buckminster Fuller. And it was just, and all type of literature topics as well. And, that became really apparent that he just, his intensity and love for learning was there. But after, attending a lot of his meetups over a period of time, what I really noticed more than anything is that actually CJ cared more about people. He cared more about the individuals that actually attended the meetups. And he demonstrated that by making sure that everybody had a voice and that everybody was heard. And that we would, when we went through a topic, if somebody was maybe not, speaking up or a little bit shy, he would gently ask them, are you, do you have anything to offer? Or would you like to speak? And what that did was, it made everybody feel comfortable. It really, everybody gravitated towards him because of his authenticity. He really wanted everybody involved, and he wanted to know what everybody thought, and he wanted to know why you thought what you thought. No, no matter what your opinion was. He just was. And I just recently went through uh, a one of these courses that actually CJ had recommended by Amy Edmondson, who is involved with the Buckminster Fuller project. And I don't know if CJ did this naturally, but what she focuses on is psychological safety, and where everybody feels safe and that they have a place that they can come and exchange ideas. And CJ naturally employs a lot of these same tactics. And one of the examples was that he would always ask an opening question and answer it first. And it was a way of actually just getting everybody comfortable and getting everybody to open up and to contribute. And he made himself vulnerable first. And that was just one approach. There were many others as well. But I want to relate this to how important this is towards the comprehensivity project as well, is that there are going to be a lot of high level thinkers, and people do need to feel comfortable. This is not just going to be a lecture series. When they come here, it needs to be a psychologically safe space. And CJ was able to do that with people at any level. And so that's something that we're going to have to focus on, is in recreating that, and making them feel comfortable. Now, the thing was that there was another lesson that CJ had basically demonstrated for everyone, as a while leading topics, and that was the fact that by respecting everyone, he was actually teaching us how to behave in everyday life, not just the situations that at the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society, that it was appropriate to listen, stop and listen to everybody, because somebody always had something to offer. Now, the thing I remember about CJ the most, for me personally, on a personal level, is he always pushed me. There were times that, he engaged me and he said, do you want to lead a discussion? And then he started to push me towards harder and harder discussions, things like, Plato or Kierkegaard or things along those lines. And he was always supportive. He always had the kindest thing to say. Like, if it didn't go exactly the way I had liked, he knew how to give me a critique that actually allowed me to do better the next time. So, a lot of my personal growth that I owe to CJ. Now, I thought I was unique when he was, that he was spending this much time with me, but he was actually doing this with everyone. He did this with a lot of different people, and he made everybody else better. And we had a ceremony the other day where it was, there was a sign outside the door, and I thought it captured exactly what CJ did so beautifully. It said, seek always to bring out the best in others, thereby bringing out the best in oneself. And CJ really did embody that. He always brought out the best in others. He brought out the best in myself, and he actually made everybody feel comfortable. So that's one of the greatest things that I will always learn from CJ, and I think it's something that's going to carry forward with the Synergetics project as well. Now, there's just one other thing that I had brought up, and I had mentioned this before in these meetups, is that, how humble CJ was. That was something that there are some people that have to tell you all the books they've read, or they have to tell you all the accomplishments that they have, and all the things that they were doing. And CJ just did them. He just absolutely, when somebody maybe, when somebody has to tell you that what they had done, sometimes they die, and then all of a sudden you know everything about them. With CJ, he passed away, and you start to learn how many people he touched and how many people he worked with, how many nonprofits he worked with, how many other people that he saved their careers in certain cases. And as Doug had said in one of his interviews, he is the center of so many different worlds. He really built communities, and I feel like he really built this community with Shrikant's platform. He really helped build. We led so many discussions on the design way, and I think of all the connections that have been made. We've had the author, we've had actually working with architects all over the world, with Robert here. It's been, and that's because of CJ and his efforts. So, those are my comments. I really believe that he led by example, and he created an environment that we need to model in order for comprehensivity to be able to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. So next up is going to be Maritza, Sandy, Joe N, and then David S. Folks, go ahead and type ! Everybody is welcome to offer their own comments, their own thoughts about CJ's life, work, and forward-looking vision of collaborating on comprehensivity. Right. Next up is Maritza.
So I had written out what I was going to say here, so I didn't forget. Or I just wanted to say really quickly that some of the things that Joe just said make me think of the fact that CJ is kind of like he is the consolidating or the converging point for most of us. So if we were all like different aspects of a Venn diagram, he's the uniting force. So I have similar stories to Joe's, just the idea of, CJ sending different things. And it's kind of weird in retrospect how he could see some things inside you that you kind of knew where they were there, but you hadn't quite explored. And he would give you the gentle nudge to explore them. All right, so I'm gonna start with a quote. Life is never incomplete if it is an honorable one. At whatever point you leave life, if you leave it in the right way, it is whole. This is a quote from Seneca. It gives me solace today, as I believe truly that it applies to CJ Fearnley. I met CJ 6 years ago in 2017 when I attended my first event at the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. Since then, I've had the privilege of getting to know CJ some and witnessing how he walked through life with such dignity, inclusiveness, and purpose. CJ and I hold similar ideas and beliefs on various worldviews, but while I'm still learning how to find the right tone for my voice and beliefs, one had but to watch CJ interacting with others to understand that he lived comfortably with his. I hope to one day reach his level of quiet confidence and intentionality. All of us here today were touched by CJ in some way. While his passing is a sudden, unexpected shock that brings sadness, let us not focus on the grief of losing such a brilliant person, mind, human. Instead, let us remember and embrace how very lucky we are for having had his friendship, mentorship, encouragement, and interaction. The way in which intention and design play into chronophiles and into the design of our lives and our civilization is one of CJ's big messages. Some of you may have heard me talk about how I believe that forward movement is the key to living fully, to walking that meaningful path. CJ embodied this, and we were fortunate enough to have walked alongside him for a time. Now it is on us to keep moving forward, letting those concepts shown to us by CJ become guiding lights for all of us as we forge our personal, meaningful paths. Let us share this with others, his ideas, his vision of a collaborative society. CJ understood and acknowledged that collaboration is not easy for everyone, and that we live in a society that cannot help but to create obstacles. He was convinced that humans are natural collaborators, but also that we might idealize what we hope to achieve and thus always think we fall short, missing the fact that the glass is really half full. When individuals work together to seek increased understanding, they each get leverage on their mutual aim to enhance their comprehensivity. Together, they or we can explore and integrate with greater depth and breadth. CJ used the ideas of Buckminster Fuller as a foundational platform for creating and sharing his ideas on comprehensivity. CJ and Bucky both believed that ideas need to be mechanically applied. And so we are picking up on CJ's and Bucky inspired ideas and running forward with them. We will interact together to strive at understanding these ideas and integrating them for ourselves, and constantly introducing them to anyone with whom we interact, with the goal being to reshape the world. I'd like to share two more quotes. These are Bucky quotes, and they're among favorites of CJ. When individuals join in a cooperative venture, the power generated far exceeds what they could have accomplished acting individually. It's by Buckminster Fuller. I'm not trying to counsel any of you to do anything really special, except to dare to think and to dare to go with the truth and to dare to really love completely. Buckminster Fuller. So with that, I say to you, join me, join us in looking forward and to intentionally exploring further CJ's proposed ideas for improving humanity. Choose to become part of his legacy. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. And I really like the way in which CJ looked forward. The way he did that is that he planned out the next 2 years. And that's what I learned. We just decided we're trying to plan for a year. And then when I went through all my emails for CJ that CJ has ever sent me, I realized that no, we need to at least plan out 2 years. So that's the way in which we are looking forward. Wonderful. So folks, next up is going to be, give me just a second here. Hold on for a second. Next up is going to be Sandy, followed by Joanne. And then we're going to have a whole bunch of people go ahead and type exclamation mark in order to speak. Sandy.
I'm very privileged to be here. I guess it's about 10 years ago that I met CJ, and I was attending Thinking Society events. Back then, they were called the Ben Franklin Thinking Society. And I remember I had some problems tying it to Ben Franklin because I actually didn't agree with some of his practices. In his, he had regular meetings with business people, and their primary purpose was to enhance each other's business and learn together. Except that many of the people in the group complained that Ben Franklin always had to be in charge. He would lecture to the group, and he entertained questions from them, but he never really did much to encourage them to collaborate in the sense that we would like to see. And that it was good that when we changed the name to the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society, we could reinvent what we were about. And one of the things that CJ and the others who were most active in leading discussions, there were only a few of us, were really interested in was exploring the idea that you don't only learn from experts. And the importance of learning from each other was that each of us has different perspectives, that they come from different backgrounds. We come from different backgrounds. Our ideas are based on life experiences that are different. Our interpretations of the things that we would like to simply say are facts, well, there really aren't so many facts. There's lots of meaning that flows around facts that may be more important than the facts themselves. And in order to enhance our learning, we do it best by collaboration. We weren't using that term so much at that time, although CJ always had that term, and it came out from time to time because his commitment to the work of Bucky was an incredibly important part of who he was all along. At first, I'd sort of dismissed this, and I said, well, Bucky had a lot of good ideas. He also had some screwy ideas that really haven't held up. And I'd point some of them out to CJ, and I'd say, CJ, you know, are you so committed to all of the work of Buckminster Fuller that you take it all in and you want to promote it? And he says, oh, no. I'm not. So some of the problems that you have, I specifically had a problem with how Bucky reinvented physics. And most physicists and teachers of physics, found what Bucky did to simplify the teaching of physics and make it easier to solve certain kinds of problems and so forth. They would have dismissed, completely. He doesn't know what he's talking about, because of course Bucky did not have a PhD in physics, and Bucky didn't use the university system the way most people are expected to. He took what he wanted and what he found valuable from those who were the experts, but he didn't elevate them, and that's something that I think CJ learned from Bucky, and he modeled that in so many ways that the idea that CJ was working on a PhD. I don't know how many of you knew that. It was not a PhD from a university. It was a PhD from the School of Life. And he picked and chose the sources. And one of the reasons that you can't get a PhD in what CJ wanted was it was a PhD in everything. Or to put it another way, it was a PhD in humanity. And PhDs are awarded in specialties almost entirely. I know there are some exceptions, and especially in recent years, there's been a lot of comprehensivity that's been included in higher education. but honestly, if you want a PhD in humanity, you kind of have to make it up yourself. And so the curriculum that CJ set for himself included everything from physics to psychology to philosophy to medicine and neuroscience. And I mean, there was nothing that CJ couldn't learn more about if he set the time and the priority to learn it, which he was wonderful at doing. Great model for planning and sticking to a plan. And you know, as soon as I say that, I have to also say to you that he was also the greatest model for changing the plan. The best example of that was the meetups that we had at the Thinking Society. He had an agenda and a lot of detailed notes and quotes that he would share with us. And we would start out at 10:30 and we would go through this agenda. And every time someone raised a point that was a little bit off the agenda, but still relevant, he'd say, yes, let's explore that. And he'd do that. And after the 2 hours that everybody was willing to stay for expired, the agenda was only half done. He didn't stop. He said, well, we still have some more stuff to go. I hope some of you can stay and we're going to work through it. Well, there were some of those meetups that lasted from 10:30 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We didn't follow the agenda, but we accomplished it all. In other words, along with this commitment, along with the planning and a commitment to the plan and the execution of it, was also an incredible amount of flexibility and really spontaneous interactions with people, because Bucky knew that other people, even if they weren't expert, would contribute more value. The other thing along this line that I learned from CJ was that the questions are usually more important than the answers. One of the things at the Thinking Society that we tried it was my job at the Thinking Society to train new facilitators and discussion leaders. And one of the things that I really picked most of this up from CJ, but I believe it intensely, and I shared it with everybody else that participated as a leader at the Thinking Society, that the questions are more important than the answers. And it's not the objective of any of our meetups to come to conclusions. And that doesn't mean that conclusions aren't important and that an activist agenda isn't ultimately the goal. But if you want to get a diversity of points of view, if you want to learn from non-experts who have different things to contribute, then you need to avoid focusing on an activist thing where you say, okay, everybody in favor, let's go and let's all go out there and fight this battle now and raise the money or do whatever it is that the activist motive will take us to. The Thinking Society was a place where we could come together, not to improve humanity directly, but indirectly, that we could learn from each other. In other words, at the Thinking Society, we put education, or really learning, ahead of an activist agenda. I notice at 52 Living Ideas, the activist agenda, and some of it is very much in alignment with Bucky's activist agenda. He had many ideas for improving the world, and I have a lot of things that I do for that too, but I don't do them so much at the Thinking Society. We kind of put aside our personal agendas and we sort of avoid forming a consensus or a group to deal with the issues that we learn about. So those are things that I really value that I got from CJ. One of the things that I mean, I don't know where to stop, but I'll say one thing. I want to say one more thing. I want to say something about leadership. CJ said he was not the leader of the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. He was just one of the organizers. And at one time there were 4 of us, and then we expanded to 6 of us. And the people have stayed for many years who had that role. And those of us today, according to CJ, were all co-equal. And I think I can speak for the rest of the co-organizers in saying we all knew all along that CJ was the real leader, but he didn't like that word. And because I've been involved in a lot of leadership things and leadership training and business management and things like that, the leadership just comes off my tongue like, sure, let's develop our leadership ability and so forth so we can be more effective and everything. But CJ never liked that word. He says, no, I'm not the leader. He didn't like the fact that we had discussion leaders. And he did everything he could to come up with synonyms for discussion leaders. And I kind of sat back and chuckled a little bit. And I understood that this was CJ's humility, that he wanted to say, I'm no greater than you are just because I happen to be in the leader's chair, and I have the agenda, and I've done some preparation. I'm going to share some ideas, great ideas from the world. I don't know all this stuff, but I've read it and I've looked at it, and I want to discuss it with you because I want to learn more about it. And that's where we come from. And I see that that's where you come from at 52 Living Ideas. I've only been to a few of your 52 Living Ideas things, and they've pretty much been the ones that CJ has led. But this idea of CJ's humility as a source of great power, and the power doesn't come from empowering yourself; it comes from empowering other people, as Maritza said. So, yeah, I think that's I should stop now and give everybody else more time to talk. But yes, thank you, Shrikant.
Thank you, Sandy. Really appreciate that. You guys have a lot more experience with CJ, with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. We're fortunate to have him for a much longer time than we did here. And so really appreciate your comments. Next up is going to be another of the organizers of the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. That's Joanne. Joe, go ahead.
Hi, everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yes, Sam, I do remember that we had that discussion a couple of times with CJ about he didn't want to use the term discussion leader anymore. He wanted to change it to facilitator. He was thinking about other words. And I had a similar reaction to you. It's like, yeah, chuckled a little bit. And CJ, the word doesn't really matter. This isn't that important. But, it was to him. And I understand it because it really showed his principles and how he looked at things. It's just a word. And maybe in the long run, whether you call the discussion leaders or something else may not seem that important, but it really did say something about him, that he didn't want to be referred to as a leader. He didn't want the hierarchy. What inspired me about CJ was, not just his amazing intellect, but, his integrity in that way. But I will say that, as you probably know, he didn't found the Thinking Society, and neither did I, and neither did any of the organizers here now. It was founded by a guy named Michael Tweed about, I don't know my dates very well, at least 15 years ago, probably a little more than that. And he has long since moved out of town. And CJ came along, again, I don't have the dates that clear in my head, probably maybe 2 years after I did, or something like that. And he really brought so much to it. I had never met someone like him, and he really brought the thinking society to a new place and a really good place. I mean, I was just so impressed with him, what he could do. I mean, just his intellect, the variety of topics he would read about, and the incredibly difficult readings he would do. And not just one thing, but multiple things that are incredibly difficult to read. And how he would, you know, read them and understand them. Not only that, but form his own original thoughts on them that were insightful and intelligent. You know, it was really impressive. Everything from, you know, his ideas about design, some of which went a little over my head, to be honest with you, but and you know, his involvement in math, and he did a whole series on Kierkegaard and the ongoing thing about Dante, and his recent project on Frankenstein, and I mean, just so many more things. I mean, I just never met anyone with the diverse intellect that he had. And like I said, not only the ability to read and understand things and tell you about them, but you know, to form his own original thoughts. He never just took anything in as is. He always thought through everything and had original thoughts about everything. And I even, one meetup he did, this was just sort of a one-off he did on a really interesting topic. It was on, you know, there were on the idea of extending the human lifespan to many centuries, and there were scientists and biologists saying this was possible. And we had, he led a meetup on that, and you know, the scientific part of it, and also the social problems, the obvious social problems that would come with that. And I loved that meetup so much. I did my own meetup on that topic about a year later, and I used a lot of his source material, and you know, he was a big help with that. But it's just, you know, I had never met anyone like him. He was, I mean, I kind of felt like he was out of my league, you know. He was very, and his preparation, I mean, I'm sure those of you who went to his meetups would notice he would have a sheet of paper with, you know, multiple laminated sheets of paper with these tiny little notes. I mean, he wrote so small. I used to joke with him. I said, CJ, did you make those notes with the help of a microscope? But, and he was just so thorough. And yet at the same time, he wasn't buried in those notes, just sort of automatically leading the meetup with them. He interacted with people so well, and the flow of it went so naturally. And he, you know, he let everybody say what they had to say, and helped determine where the meetup would go. And there was no rigidness about it at all. It flowed so well. And yet he had these incredibly detailed, extensive notes at the same time. And, you know, he would expect not to get through them all. And I was just so impressed, not only with his intellect, but with his ability to lead discussions and you know, get people involved also. But I think, you know, what I find inspiring about him even more than his intellect is just his personal integrity, because he led his life by his beliefs. I mean, he wasn't just one of these people who read a lot of books and talked about it and talked about his beliefs and then just sort of lived their lives like everyone else lived their lives. I mean, he really lived what he believed, and he treated people the same way. I mean, you know, maybe this isn't a big, you know, maybe it isn't a big thing. I mean, but he and Jeannie lived without a car, you know, and not in the center of Philadelphia either. And you know, I was, you know, I live in the middle of Philadelphia. I gripe about how hard it is to get around, you know, and he's, you know, that was really impressive to me, just that. As somebody at the Ethical Society, I don't remember who said it, but he said, unlike most people, CJ was never on the money train. No, he lived for ideas. He lived for communicating his ideas to people, and he lived for helping other people, you know, access their own ability to be thoughtful and to come up with ideas. You know, that's what mattered to him, and that's how he lived his life. You know, not you know, on the money train. I mean, as some people would say, he really led his life according to his beliefs. He didn't just talk about them. And that to me was even more inspiring than the amazing talents of his intellect. Going along with that was he was a very kind person. I never once saw him get power hungry about anything, or pull rank on people about anything, or anything like that, or get short-tempered with people, or do anything with selfish motivations. He was as pure as I've seen anybody. And I think his real core belief, as Joe B said this very well, he was even more interested in people than he was in ideas. And I think what interested him was not just telling people all these ideas he had. He wanted to get ideas from other people. He wanted to help people think for themselves, and he wanted to help people get involved in the process of being creative and sharing ideas. And doing that meant more to him, I think, than just the ideas did. He was really a people person in that way. And he would often say, I think it's in the mission statement of the Thinking Society about everybody discovering their own inner genius. But CJ really believed that to the core, and that was, I think, more than anything else, was the principle he lived by, was that everybody has, even people who may seem not very articulate on the surface, really have the potential for their own thoughtfulness. And he really believed that, and he absolutely lived by that. And he treated everybody accordingly. And he loved the dialogue and the interaction even more than he loved the ideas. And it still hasn't sunk in that he's gone. I mean, it happened so fast. I mean, the surface of my brain understands that, but I think inside I'm still sort of expecting to be able to speak with him again. So anyway, I guess I'll stop there. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate that. Next up is going to be David, followed by Doug and Vanessa. David, go ahead.
Thanks. It's good to be with everybody. I'll sort of repeat what I said yesterday because I put it together and it kind of covers my thinking better than trying to be extemporaneous entirely, right? So I started off saying that we're reckoning a suddenly shortened life, and that calls us difficultly each to reflect in our own way. And that CJ, whom I met a dozen years ago, being in that room we were in yesterday, it reminded me of him. It has a very simple, unassuming presentation. As people have been writing in the chat, sort of like a Quaker meeting. It's a room that's sort of nondescript, with some intention. It's transformed and it becomes a separate place in the world, and we dedicate it to something profound, sacred, and transcendent. And it was always up to everyone who was present with CJ to do that, to take the true depth of your time with CJ, because he gave you an opportunity for each individual to reach some kind of depth and in the structure of a community. And I would say, personally, I found it was his mixture of optimistic striving, clamorous openness, and enthusiastic cheering on of others besides him that made my experience with him unique and irreplaceable. We all know his style, simultaneously taking the most abstruse abstractions, such as design, whatever that can possibly mean, and having us labor unrelentingly, not for days or weeks, but for months or years on the subject to make it concrete, realized, actual, palatable, and tangible. Initially deeply theoretical, yes, but ultimately to make it practical so that we can bring it to action and act with intention as designers. And this unfolding of the notion of seeing ourselves in place as individuals, atomic and tiny, yes, but intentional actors entangled with our whole environment from within our cultural perspective. And that necessitates enlightening our connection to the whole, a universal viewpoint, unveiling the overarching demands of comprehensivity. So as we talk, the question is, how can this taskmaster we all knew become beloved by so many people? Look at the collection of people here today and yesterday. It's more than just our shared intellect and interests and intellectual drives. It's even more than the amazing degree to which CJ went on behalf of others to find diverse new riches to share, always giving. It is his action, his work, showing us a model of the ideal leader, and his directed efforts bringing so many groups of interest to form and persist, which marks a gold standard in community building. And this has been said. This is a design legacy. So yes, he sparked and kept the spark of discovery awakened in us, the urge to seek widely, discover more, appreciate more. He enlivened our minds, enriched our spirits by sharing his light freely, prodding us, but somehow he also reached each person individually at their level with true respect, opening us all. Ultimately, at this level, what came through was the sense of authenticity, authentic goodness, which was the unique, inimitable CJ. He not only brought us together, prodded us on, generously gave us his gifts, but led us to give of ourselves back to the whole. And he did this with a very special quality, true gentleness. We all felt his gentleness. CJ was truly a designer, a scholar, and a gentle human being, his own ultimate particular. I have two pieces of poetry that are sort of directed towards comfort. I could read one at the end, perhaps, maybe at the end of the whole night, if you want. This one. I'll read the first one here by Ben Jonson. It's a kind of comfort. It's about a premature death feeling entirely different to the loss of someone who's had a lot of time to use, to live, and the terrible, gasping unfairness of it all compounding our grief. How suddenly the shock of losing someone we thought we had decades left to enjoy and learn with is penetrating. There's very little that can be said to make it more bearable. But the poet, Ben Jonson, has found something to consider, may contain some comfort. He reminds us that the value of our lives is not dictated by its length or solidity. Living to become an ancient oak tree, huge and eventually toppling to our own weight, is not the only way to live a good human life. CJ knew his grand old trees, and I point here at Sandy, one of our old trees. For all that the oak is strong, some of us are meant to grow in other ways. There are those among us who live like lilies, destined to last for only a few summer days. But they are, as Johnson says, the plant and flower of light. The beauty of their lives is not constrained, nor is their impact diminished by its brevity. Their life, though short, has fullness, completeness, its own perfection, showing us the color and light we would otherwise overlook. This may be how, though with us for such a brief time, they manage to mean so much to us as they do. So though he's gone, his memory, source of light, still with us, that won't be extinguished. It's a short poem. It is not growing like a tree in bulk doth make man better be, or stand long an oak 300 year to fall a log at last dry, bald, sere. A lily of the day is fairer in May, although it fall and die that night. It was the plant of flower and light in small proportions we just beauties see, and in short measure life may perfect be.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Save something for the end, just a reading with Maritza.
Absolutely. Yes. We're going to end with that reading. Thank you. Next is going to be Doug. Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm digesting this all very differently in the last couple of days because I think Bucky used to talk about gestation rates, that things happen and then they happen again. It takes you a long time to digest them. And I think the Dalai Lama said that when you want to raise your energy, you think about death. So I think a lot of this has really raised my energy. But this now I feel like, because I'm not in Philadelphia, I'm in LA. Most of my interactions with CJ have been at a conference, like every other year, or on these YouTube things. So an important idea of Bucky is ephemeralization. Is CJ really was an ephemeral phenomena to me. So in a way, he wasn't really dead this last week, or he hadn't really died. It was like he's sort of there, and I think he continues to be there. But I think slowly the waves of his passing have sort of hit the West Coast, and it's been also very resonant to when I lost my brother, who was very like CJ and his omni-curious attitude and his sharing with younger people and his teaching kids how to play music or basketball or art or whatever. Giving them to play football in the snow, but that playfulness, that love of people. And so it's really, but in talking to Joe, I was trying to figure out when I met CJ, and I didn't know. I couldn't figure it out. I thought it was in this century. And then I realized I met him in 1995 at a conference, the centennial of Bucky's birthday. And it was in San Diego. And Peter Meisen, who will be joining you in a few weeks, came to my theater to rent it for the event, and the theater was booked. So Peter is relentless, sort of like CJ, and he drafted me to direct the opening night, and it was created by a lot of people, but I tried to direct it, but it was really a group collaboration. And I kept telling Peter, there's only so much we can direct this. There've got to be loose joints in it for the feedback of other people. It can't be a strict program, giving the Bucky crowd and their integrity. So I kind of, with that, I think I anticipated CJ, but I hadn't met CJ. And suddenly this man gets up on stage, throws this magenta pink flyers into the air. They land all around him like a pink mushroom cloud. And everybody talks about how gentle he was, but he was angry with this crowd. And he said, we're running out of time. And here were some of the top thinkers in Bucky. Harold Kroto, who won the Nobel Prize, was there. Kiyoshi Kuromiya was still there. And I think he got a kick out of it because Kiyoshi was a bit of a disruptor. He actually babysit Martin Luther King's children on the day he was killed. Kiyoshi was part of that whole movement. And so there are these big names in the Bucky world. And CJ got up on stage knowing that the decade Bucky predicted we had to save the world was the 80s. And we were 5 years past that. And he's going, we're running out of time. And I think he's still sending that message. But I think he learned, because I went up and I said, I got to meet this guy. And Peter Meisen accused me of setting it up, this disruptor. And I said, no, but I got to meet that guy. And I went up and met him. And then I forgot that's where I met him because it was so different to his gentle patience, which I think he must have been. And I went up to talk to him and he was sort of shaking with passion. And I think he just realized I need to just relax, focus, and buckle down and work on the long term. And that was 27 years ago. And I think this gentleness was, a discipline that he because it's not always what was going on inside him, I think, and what he shared with that crowd. So that's sort of all I would say right now. The other one I would say is that he was planning years ahead, and he wanted to read Journey to the West, the Chinese novel. And so at some point, maybe we should tackle that in his honor. But because he wanted to escape the colonial aspects of things. And people have talked about this. He didn't want a leader. He would shy away from, the domination of colonialism and ideas and in land grabs and whatever. I mean, he really was. The action he had was to really, in a way like Bucky's, save the world, save humanity from itself, you know? I mean, and in the end, it was really the gentleness and love that pervaded and in his life and what he passes on to us, as Maritza and others have talked about, and
Thank
Joe
you.
and his personal. So thank you. Thank you all for what you've shared. Because I wanted to hear more from the Thinking Society people.
Absolutely. You're going to hear from many, many more people who have lined up. Thank you, Doug. And I have to tell you that, you know, in line with expanding our range of comprehensivity, we've been going through the Chinese corpus. We finished Lao Tzu. It took us about 50 meetups. Currently, we're going through Confucius Analects. That's going to take another maybe 70, 80 meetups. The next one is going to be Art of War. And I think the fourth candidate should be the Journey to the West. So I'm really looking forward to that. But we're systematically going through the Chinese corpus. And we've had, you know, people like Jason and Amon who actually read and translate Chinese, and we're going back and forth with them of saying which ones should we prioritize. So I think Journey to the West is going to be number 4 for us.
I just wanted to take 2 seconds to say, also, I think that's where I met Medard Gable, one of my students, played the World Game with him. Kirby was there, but I didn't really connect with him much there. That came later. And then so many of the other faces here I've gotten to know through CJ. So thank you. And he was always a support to my endeavors all along.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So folks, now we are going into, so it's going to be now Vanessa, Ed, Rupali, George, Patty, Jordan, Robert, Stephen, Jang, and Allison. Please, let's keep our comments to maybe about 2 to 3 minutes, something like that, so that we can get all the comments in. And I encourage everybody else to type exclamation mark to line up. So next up is going to be Vanessa. Vanessa, go ahead.
Yes, I've been going to a Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society for over 9 years. And I believe he was one of the original leaders in those groups. And I remember the write-ups and everything. And he even said, you know, that's all optional, because he would usually read it. And sometimes him simply reading it made it a little more sense. And I was ready to get the design way. And he said, I'm thinking about leaving another 4 or 5 discussions on just these 7 pages of this section. And he would add, like, and he would even maybe change, or you could see him taking notes and taking in what people said. I remember reading his description, just saying, I think exploring the universe. And that's one time I wasn't tempted to Google anymore. There was like a mystique around him. You almost wondered what the next topic would be. And he challenged things, not to be confrontational, just even like, what is a scientific method? Do we really have it all wrong, or is what they're doing most productive? And even being able to laugh at himself. I think he did something on like, what is normal? And he said, maybe we're the freaks. And he, like Sandy said, he was willing to adjust and modify, because I was one of those, you know, you wait till you recognize. And it got to the point I raised my hand, because before we'd be back and forth like at the cafeteria. And he would write the list and be very dedicated to that. And he may clarify, or like if he knew, I would say something just out of habit, you know, the sun rose today. It's like, well, we really know that, you know, it's the earth, it's not the sun rising. But not being to, you know, to say, okay, you got that wrong, but just, you know, maybe to clarify for those that weren't there. And I wanted to do the lead discussion. Sandy, I mentioned that. And you look at what he puts out, there's like a dissertation. And he was like the epitome of that. And it was kind of intimidating. But then just getting all organized with that and just getting the thoughts down. And there's times, like he said, he would try to maybe get back to the question, but then he realized, well, maybe the discussion's going in a more productive way than I had planned. And he maybe would reiterate, clarify, and like I said, very calm demeanor, humble. And I would say he was realistic, not being a realist, but just realizing, you know, my place on earth, like an explorer, just to take in what others say. And sometimes a more humble and like he didn't brag, he didn't like state what he did. Like found it after I knew he worked in computers and like networking, but that's the extent of it. And even like his love for humans and Jeannie, like a few times he would sit and talk to me after the meetups, like saying, we want to get this bike ride. It's finding the happy medium because, I hadn't seen him for such a while. But I realized, they enjoyed their bike rides together. And he would push, like I said, looking for not the underdog, but just pushing the Jitsi or the alternative to Zoom, saying, we got to support the underdog here. Everyone's losing Zoom, and I think he was dedicated to that because in the beginning it would crash. He had to turn the video off, and he would take meticulous notes. I think because of an improved readily, he would ask, make sure, let me know exactly what's wrong with this because I want to improve it and improving others. And like I could go on and on, but probably the most thing that stuck out is I thought the design way was like a child with a Raggedy Ann doll. That's worn to the T. I thought that was maybe a backup copy he had because I thought his was a little more worn, or maybe Jeannie fixed it up a bit for the table. But like I said, the design way, he always had that in tow. That was kind of his, you know, Bible might be the wrong word, but and like I said, he would even say, "Oh no, we're going to do more and more in this," and he would look for input for others and maybe saying, how could we maybe adjust it? And sometimes you would see that expression like, "Okay, I got something good out of this," and maybe I was put in my place would be the wrong thing to say for him, but someone else may say, "You put me in my place, and maybe I should look at it a different way, and maybe we need to recover this again, or maybe go backwards." And even the thing about mathematics and this and that, and willing to, a little humility. And let's keep challenging because the more you put like conflict, sometimes the better you understand the problem versus having the solution and being happy with it. Did I keep it under 2 minutes?
Approximately, that's good.
Okay,
Thank you, Vanessa.
Andy the baton.
Next up is going to be Ed Rupali, followed by George. Ed.
Yes, thank you, Srikant. There's so many things I can say about CJ, and most of them have been said already. He was a very special guy. He really was. And I just can't believe that he's gone because he really had an effect on my life. He's a man of very high intellect. Very often he would be above my head, and he would be willing to, after the meeting, discuss things with me personally and try to explain things in greater clarity so that I, as a layperson, could understand his intellectual ramblings. And he was into so many different things. He was truly, as you would say, a comprehensivist. But he was a people person. He made each of us feel good about ourselves. He didn't say anything bad about anyone. He really loved each and every person that would come to the meeting. I never saw him treat anyone with disrespect. And that is, such a diverse group as we have. It's very easy. I myself can be irritating to individuals, but Srikant, I'll tell you that CJ loved everyone and he treated every individual with great respect. And he would be able to talk to me about pharmacy, and I would be able to talk to him about another philosopher that he might not agree with. And we would have back and forth a lot of great discussions. And he was one of a kind, and he will be missed. But I would just say that as paramount virtue, beside his great intellect, was his respect for other people. And that I will always remember, and I will never forget him till I die, for sure. So I'm sure that all of my colleagues mourn him, every single one. And thank you for having us here.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. Folks, so next up is going to be, let me just see here. Next up is going to be Rupali, George, Jordan, Robert, Stephen, Jeng, Allison, Maxine, Mark, and Greg. So we'll start with Rupali. Rupali, go ahead.
So I had not met CJ, but I'm touched by his work. His work with the comprehensivity at 52 Living Ideas. His work on educating girls, and his work on collaborative work for humanity. All of these ideas are also part of Buckminster Fuller's philosophy. And Buckminster Fuller in 1974, he talked about using communication tools to develop ideas. And he talked about, at that time, he was very much excited about using technology to have discussions where it would be more documentaries. And I feel that the time has come where, with this technology that we have, where we can all get together and discuss ideas without any monetary purpose. And that's what Buckminster Fuller said, where people are not talking for money or not going for any particular agenda. It's only for the betterment of themselves and in turn betterment of others. So I think with what CJ has done with comprehensive meetups and what you're doing, Shrikant, with 52 Living Ideas is in line with Buckminster Fuller's thoughts about communication. And then the second thing that I want to say is that through these discussions that you've planned for 2 years going forward, CJ's legacy will continue. He was a visionary and a leader, and he's inspired so many of us to continue his work. So he will live on in the work that we do. Thank you for reminding us that we are looking backwards to move forward.
Thank you, Rupali. And Rupali is the fourth co-conspirator here, along with me, Maritza, Joe, and Rupali. So 4 of us are going to be leading this charge on Bucky. Rupali is a particularly good addition to this because she's an architect who actually has worked under architects who use Buckminster Fuller's ideas. She's built geodesic domes in India. So it's wonderful to have her on board here. All right, next up is going to be George. George.
Hello, everybody. I pretty much threw out what I'd prepared to say because I want to riff on what others have said who came before me. One thing which struck me was what Shrikant said in the very beginning, that meeting CJ was like meeting an old friend. And this is kind of how I met CJ through the technical Linux part of the world, in particular the Philadelphia Linux users group. And after those meetings every month, we would go to some place to eat and drink and chat, and very informal. And people, and this is something I now realize more in retrospect, that CJ would sit back and contribute to somebody's conversation if he had something to say, or if there was a lull, he'd look at someone who hadn't said anything and say, oh, what do you like to do? And I'm thinking of this not as something I recognize at the time, but the more I recognize now, that he was, as somebody else talked about leadership, being a leader in a totally humble manner that nobody noticed that he was leading. But back to what Shrikant had said, during one of these conversations, I brought up mathematics, which was something I had studied in college, but kind of abandoned for like 30 years of being a computer person. And so I got in a conversation with CJ, and I realized I was meeting an old friend, somebody who loved mathematics, didn't see it just as this tool that you had to use to do something. And so he encouraged me to join Math Counts. And I'll riff on what's another theme here, which is CJ's incredible thoroughness. And I'm going to, again, put that in what might seem like a negative light. The people here, like David, who are also in Math Counts, will understand what I'm saying, that it was at times too much, that we were spending, 3 or 4 years on this one book by George Polya. And towards the end, and I also wish to make this as a tribute to CJ and the other friends of mine in Math Counts, I felt through the years with Math Counts and CJ, I felt encouraged to go back into mathematics for myself. And I started studying some math that was in a different direction from where Math Counts was going. And this took more and more of my time, and I had less time to devote and keep up with this incredible in-depth way we were going into Polya. But I feel, since CJ became my friend, I feel an obligation to try and help carry that on. But I will bring that up with the other Math Counts people. I'll just bring up quickly my strange relation to Bucky. You probably know more about him than I do, but I encountered him actually through geometry. He's actually in the great tradition of geometry from Euclid, from the Egyptians, from India, from the Arabs, from all over the world. And one of the last of those people in Germany, over 100 years ago, was David Hilbert, very famous in mathematics. And one of David Hilbert's students was Max Dane, who during the 30s had to be a refugee from Germany. And he was friends with people like Kurt Gödel and Einstein and so forth, but Princeton and the big unis didn't consider him important enough. So he ended up going to this very strange university called Black Mountain, which was like, the only way I can put it is like an anarchist collaborative university. And I also know, I don't know the name, that someone from Bauhaus ended up there, the architecture design movement in Germany, and many other things. And that I learned that Bucky had been a student of Max Dane, but not in that teacher-student relationship, because Black Mountain was much more informal. And I studied Bucky's geometry, which was very interesting. Many people know about the geodesic dome, but one thing which fascinated me was an object called the tensegrity, which was a totally new kind of structure combined of two elements in compression and tension. And one of my professors at Cornell, where I went, who was a geometer, was studying these objects. So I kind of ran into Bucky again.
Excellent. Thank you, George. Appreciate that. And we will definitely be going deep into Bucky's geometry. That we'll be doing mostly like once a week or so, starting 2023 and 2024. So look forward to that. Thank you, George. Next up is going to be Jordan, Robert, Stephen, Jang, Allison, Maxine, and Mark. So next up is Jordan. Jordan, go ahead.
Thank you. I really appreciate the robustness everyone's attributing here to CJ. I mean, I knew him so little, and then like everyone said, oh, I met an old friend, so quickly, so much resonance. And the leadership issue with the word reminds me, I think it was Alexander Auguste Ledru-Rollin, the French leader, I believe a general, who said, oh, there go my people. I must follow them. I'm their leader. And what it is that it's that enhancing people to be their best self. And so that you become your best self simply by steeping in the pool of collaboration, the leadership being, in a sense, connective tissue. And that kind of integral relationship, even beyond humility. And I think from that, like as George was saying, he looked over to someone else and said, who was quiet, well, what do you like to do? And what I find about that is that creates one of those experiences of what I call a sanctuary of a question. There's absolute beautiful not knowing, but you've given someone a nave and an altar and side aisles and a choir. They can sing to their, their rooftops because you don't know, but you're going to learn. And then they get to put that voice out there. And I think just simply now, to keep this short too, I believe it was Jamie Anderson said, grief is love with no place to go. And with CJ's memories is pretty much magical blessings. He's an integral part of us going forward. There's such a dignity in difference, which to me, I guess, overlaps with Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks' works of same dignity and difference and self, culture, and community. And he just seemed to be so much about, a lot of people master something. But in his case, there's a beautiful vanity I find in mastery. And your responsibility is that mastery leads to further discovery. There's a currency of value in the process. And so he then owned that responsibility to then, once he's a master in one place, he's going to explore discoveries in another and another. And you find that you learn not so much to be a polymath, but I find that instead of polymathy, that turns around simply into robustly living. And instead of multiple expertise, you become unthreatened. I think rather than even be humble, God help the country that gives the warriors the thinking and the thinkers the war. However that quote goes, I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, where it's important to have that robust life that you've literally experienced first round, and then cyclically next round, you get more and more. So you're not always sight reading the track, but like he would do, copious notes. He was fluid, but he didn't go with the flow. Like, in a sense, only dead fish go with the flow. He'd turn on a dime. And I think what's great about that is, often life passes you by when you're too busy making plans, but he would make great plans so that he could address most of the topics that are going to come up. And when new things came in, he reached out and caught the ball at a different spot. So I'll close with, grief is love with no place to go, except he has magical blessings. I know with me, and even in short order, in a big way, which for me is high honor that I was able to meet someone for such a brief time, even outside mostly from you guys, but that grief with his love with no place to go, I can listen in community and participate, and that goes forward instead of having no place to go. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jordan. Really appreciate that. And thanks to the forward-thinking nature of CJ, I think there is a place for love to go, because it allows us to go into the future, to build the kind of future that he cared about, and we are going to do that. So I really look forward, because in that sense, his ideas, his core passion lives on in us. And so I really, appreciate that. Thank you. Next, up is going to be Robert, followed by Stephen and Cheng. Robert.
I want to thank everyone for their input and their insights. I didn't know CJ. I never met him. I never shook his hand. I never met him in person. But I did become acquainted with CJ's mind through his essays, his deliveries on the meetups, and his offerings and dialogues that he gave to people who I was able to see on meetups. That way I did become familiar with CJ. Through his very essence, his passion, and his bliss, and through his never-ending quest of the spirit of life.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Next up is going to be Stephen, followed by Cheng and Allison. Stephen.
I was really surprised to hear about his passing, but I do want to bring up my acquaintance with him back in the 90s with the Philadelphia Linux user group, and I appreciated having those memories brought up. He was involved in an internet service provider in Center City, Philadelphia, and I certainly remember those meetings that we had and going out for pizza and beer afterwards. And he was involved with a company called Linux Force, Buck Fleming, and we kept an association after the collapse of the .com era. That's going back, it's almost ancient history by now. But I went on to other things, and he and I would still talk on the phone. He would call me and we would exchange ideas. But what he loved about it, and I have to just echo the thoughts of a lot of people here, is he loved the idea of Linus Torvalds, the idea of a computer operating system being built by cooperation, not by authority. People could work together for common goals, exchange ideas. And he just loved to see that. I had my definite opinions. I had finished working for years and years at AT&T, so I had my own definite opinions. And we just loved to sit around and just talk about different ways of approaching things. And he just seemed to thrive off of it. And I could really see how his personality led to it and why he was interested in that area. And I did check the website for Linux Force this evening and saw that his last post to it was November of 2019. So I didn't see Buck Fleming on the list of anybody contributing. And perhaps if anybody has given him a phone call, maybe I'll just go ahead and do it and just let him know. And the last time Buck and I spoke was after 9/11. He had called me to talk about one thing or the other. So I just wanted to echo some of the thoughts and sentiments here and just say that, it goes all the way back. It's hard to believe it's been over 25 years already for crying out loud by now. But thank you very much for putting this together. And it was very much appreciated. And I enjoyed having these memories brought back. Very, very kind of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you for bringing something from earlier part of his life. Really appreciate that. Next up is going to be Cheng. Cheng, go ahead.
Hi, yeah. I just got home, so it's right on time. So yeah, I was very shocked because I don't know CJ personally, like some people at the 5-2 Living Ideas, but I was very big impact by him. And I feel very envy the people who actually in Philadelphia who had the chance to meet him and know him for years, because a very short period of time, I learned something from him at the Comprehensive Wednesday. It totally opened up my mind. It's like a big shift. I mentioned in the message sharing, it's like you're shifting your viewpoint or something, like you feel dizzy, like they break off all your setup, like all the understanding of the world, suddenly it's break off. It's like, you don't know, you're auto focus or something. It's just such a big changes, I think, in how people are thinking, the way people are thinking, and also the design way, later learned CJ brought to us, and I was lucky to host with, other friends and here, and we learned so much. At first I have no idea what it's talking about. So like, what is this book talking about? But then as we go along, I learned so much from it. I still refer back to it and maybe need to read it again. Buck Miss Fuller, I haven't tackled him for a while, even I heard about him. And I'm so glad, you're going to have this meeting, and I'm ready to learn more about him. I actually talked with another architect because I was surprised. We never learn about Buck Miss Fuller in architectural history. And I talked with another architect, he's graduated from MIT and Harvard. I said, have you heard about him? And he said, oh yeah, we heard about him. I said, oh, that's interesting. It seems people know about him, but not in architecture. Because he's architecture care more about aesthetic in many ways, space design, but he cares more about humanity, how to change people's life. I think that's the reason the architectural history, he had bigger influence in philosophy and thinking in society than architecture, which may be more valuable for regular human being anyway. So I feel really sad, because I missed the opportunity to really know this person who brings so much changes. But also I'm glad, because of him, we can learn all these things continuously. So thank you.
Thank you, Zheng. There are several things that happened in COVID. Horrible as it was, there were some bright spots. One of the spots is that we would not have these recordings of 26 meetups by CJ apart from COVID, and we would not have gotten to know, these many people would not have got to know CJ and would not be able to actually build on his legacy as well as we can do now. So thank you, Zheng. Next up, just a second. Next up is going to be Allison, Maxine, Mark, and Greg. Allison, go ahead.
I only met CJ once. I went to one in-person meetup before COVID, and it was on anthropology. And I remember his write-up was so long that I skimmed it. I didn't read it really carefully. And I went in and I thought, it's going to be like a 2-hour meeting. And it was 4 hours. And I was completely blown away. And he knew immediately that I hadn't really read it that carefully. And he was really encouraging and really wanted me to come back, but he could completely see right through every hole in anything that I said, but was, handled it in such an encouraging way. And then I wasn't able to come back for some different reasons until everything shut down. And then what I found, like what I always feel like is like the very best teachers, it's like they're holding a mirror up to you and they show you things in yourself that you may not even see yourself. And I feel like that's what CJ did. And I feel like with Dante, I thought it was really odd that he planned everything, but then he didn't come to the meetups. But then he would send email, like he'd watch every video and he would send all these emails with notes about things I said. And he understood what I said better than I did sometimes. But he was always like, I feel like he pushed me well out of my comfort zone and pushed me to consider things in a way that I didn't do. And he would just hold me to it. And I remember I bought that book on the 4,000 years of science. And then, so he sends an email. He says, Allison, I know you bought the book, but I see you haven't signed up. I'd like to know why and really want you to come. And I want to hear what you have to say. So I was like, okay, fine. I better read these chapters. And he did that all the time. And then it was funny because like his Jitsi thing, I hated Jitsi, but I remember he would like he and Sandy would argue about Jitsi and other people were like, get rid of Jitsi. And he's like, Allison, what do you think? And I hated Jitsi, but I liked CJ so much. I was like, oh, it's fine, not a problem. I didn't want to offend him. And then when he wanted us to read Frankenstein, I'm like, I don't want to read it twice, and And but the thing is, by going through it he was right. I did see more things, when we're starting all over again. And I feel like that's what he did, is like, you'd want to do something to get to this sort of comfortable place. And he's like, no, keep going, keep going, keep going. And then you did get so much more out of it than you ever thought you could. And I feel like as things started to reopen, I met most people at different like picnics and social hours and things. And he was the person I was so excited to really get to know again in person. And so sometimes, a death is a loss of what you knew. And sometimes what you're grieving is what you didn't get to experience. And, but I guess I just have to think that, everything that he gave me, it'll all continue pushing myself, because I'll hear him in my ear, like, coming after me. So I'm just very grateful that I got to know him, and in whatever capacity I was able to. But I'm really, really going to miss it.
Thank you, Alison. I really like your comment about how he did not attend Dante, but he actually did more work to both kind of set it up. He would write these detailed background essays for it, and he has actually done that for our Bucky Meetup. These Bucky Inspired Comprehensivity Meetup that we are going to do next year and the year after that. He has actually, like, I was thinking about it, he's given us the critical pieces that we need. He's given us the structure, he's given us the people, he's given us everything to get started. And he has known exactly what to give in a very short way, which works within his schedule. Even in this time, he's been able to do that. Wonderful. Thank you, Alison. Next up is Maxine. Maxine, thank you for being patient. You're next. Maxine, you need to unmute.
All right, I've unmuted. You can skip me. I don't know how to lower my hand, but many of the things that I was going to say have been said. So skip me.
Sure. Next up is Mark, followed by Greg and Phil. If anybody else wants to offer their comments or thoughts about CJ, they're welcome to do that. Just go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Mark, you're next.
So I really appreciate you having this for CJ. I had the pleasure of, sitting at countless Saturdays and Sundays across the table from CJ. I can't say that like I was like a personal friend. Like I didn't really know a lot about CJ personally. What I could tell you about him is that, at the time when I first started with the Thinking Society, it was either Sandy or Andrea or Joe or CJ that was, going to be running the meeting. And I never had to look at who the author, who was the meeting organizer was. I could always read the content a little bit, and I could tell who the meeting organizer was. And when I say a little bit, if I looked and I scrolled down and I saw like pages and pages, that was CJ. You knew every time that, what you were getting. I often disagreed with him, but I was incredibly moved and impressed and just blown away by the amount of preparation he would do, the amount of dedication he had, the just sheer, fortitude. I mean, it was a force of nature to be able to be that dedicated to doing this. And I mean, look at everyone here. I mean, there's 40 some odd people, and there's just a small subset of the people he's moved and brought together. I mean, this community exists largely, obviously, Shrikant, but I mean, we're here because he brought us here. We all owe each other, well, we don't owe each other, but we are known to each other and have shared things about ourselves and our lives and thoughts, and he's shaped our thoughts and bringing us together. And it's just that I feel kind of conflicted in a way, because I think I should have known him better. Like I said, I mean, Joe, I know that you spoke with him like a lot personally, and I'd be standing next to you asking you, hey, are we gonna go and get some lunch? And there was a conversation that I had to wait half an hour sometimes, for you guys to get done. and I really feel bad that I wasn't actively part of that, like on the personal level. But I feel that I owe him a tremendous debt myself. I'm sure that everybody else probably has some feeling of that. So I didn't hear everybody's comments, but I'm very glad to have known him. I'm so glad to hear that, you know, the structures and the things that he's put down are going to be implemented and live on in, you know, in you know, multiple groups. And again, Allison, you kind of stole my thunder on the Jitsi thing because I wanted to bring that up just as a point of the dedication, because we all hated it. It was always error, and had, you know, echoes, and people couldn't get it to work. And he liked the idea. I believe somebody else was talking about Linux, and that was like free software, open source, and he was supporting the community, and he just wanted to make it work. And again, the dedication, because he would write up like errors and like try to encourage people, like, get what kind of browser you're using and like what were the exact circumstances so we can debug this, so you can help the Jitsi community get better, you know. And it's just part of who he was. And I'm thrilled to have known him, and incredibly sorry to see him go.
Thank you, Mark. And on Jitsi also, I have to tell you, you know, because he pushed Jitsi very hard, and I made the argument to him is that if you want to use a software, you have to look at the user base and what people are comfortable using and people are already using, and then you'll get more people to show up. And he agreed with that, and that's why we've done all these meetups that we've done with him on Zoom. So it's wonderful. Thank you, Mark. Next up is going to be Greg. Greg, go ahead. Greg, you need to unmute. Let me see. Yes, Greg, can you say something? Okay, I think you have an audio issue. I don't know if we can resolve it.
Is this a Jitsi meeting here?
No. This is only for Greg. Everybody else has been able to, so, you know, thank you. The next up is Phil. Phil, go ahead.
Hello, good evening. Yeah, I didn't know CJ that well, but I feel like I've gotten to know him quite a bit when we were planning the Dante 1 year reading, which was an amazing feat for all of us, I think. But CJ obviously played a huge part in that, and as a lot of you have mentioned, he didn't show up to a lot of the meetups, but he was definitely active behind the scenes. And every couple of weeks, we would go back and forth on the planning, and that, you know, we would have debates on how to title each session to make it more appealing and more interesting, and to, you know, help people sort of keep the pace and keep the interest going. And this wasn't easy, because Dante is not for the faint of heart. And, you know, and we covered all of it. We've covered all the way from La Vita Nuova, which most people haven't read, all the way to the Paradiso. And CJ has stuck with it, obviously, and we've planned the entire thing. And it's been kind of amazing now, looking back on it, that it actually was a tremendous success, and the recordings are there. If you guys haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to do that. But anyway, so I got to know CJ in our kind of behind the stage dialogues and emails and back and forth, and sometimes we would disagree, and but as people have said, he was very very gentle, very respectful. He didn't know me, I didn't know him, but yet we were able to kind of just hit the ground running and work together. And it was a beautiful partnership for me, and I hope for him. But I really enjoyed working with him. And then I guess we enjoyed it so much that we decided to do it again. And we did it with Dostoevsky. The Possessed. And those meetups, CJ did attend. And so I got to see him in action, and it was very interesting. He would always offer a fresh perspective, and sometimes he would challenge me on some of the interpretation that I thought, wow, where's this guy coming from? but a lot of people really appreciated an unorthodox view and interpretation of the text, and that's what he was good at. He was very open-minded. He would not take anything for granted and just be very open about things he didn't know or didn't understand. And I think that kind of disarmed everyone and made everybody at ease, because if we're all kind of learning, then it's okay to admit that you don't understand this or that, and that actually facilitates learning, right? Learning is not about putting up some pretense. It's more about exploring our limitations. And CJ was very good about just being very honest. And then he had, as a lot of people have mentioned, he would take very copious notes and send them out and share his insights. And he did that for Dante. He did that for the Dostoevsky series. That was very helpful, because he would also, in the notes, he would be honest about things that didn't make sense to him or he had questions about. And I thought that, anyway, that was very good, and because it stimulates you, right? It enables you to be honest yourself, and also to kind of get into this mode that it's okay to make mistakes as you learn. In fact, that's the integral part of learning, is making mistakes. And I think it was one of our sessions where we talked about that. One of the principles of comprehensivism, one of those principles was error. Error is one way of erroring is one way of learning. And we were contrasting that with Dante's approach, where you had to be always right to learn, or at least that was the medieval mindset, which is different from modern or Buckminster Fuller's mindset. So anyway, it was a very interesting time, and like I said, I got to see CJ in action, and felt like I really got to know him a little bit better in the course of those two events. And of course, it's so sad to see his presence gone now, but not really, because again, we have so much that we have recorded, and it's out there, and that's amazing, of course, to know that we've preserved a lot of that experience together. And of course, Shrikant, sounds like you are taking that even further to continue his legacy. So it's excellent.
Absolutely. Thank you, Phil. I mean, Phil is a very good example of how CJ leveraged his effort, because he's always been interested in, literature was not one of his strengths, and he knew it. And he deliberately wanted to do something in literature. And he provided crucial pieces to the Dante meetups, to the Dostoevsky meetups, to the Frankenstein meetup, both kind of organization, writing, comments, all kinds of things to help. And then that enables somebody like Phil, who is really deeply into literature, to bring a lot. And then you have a whole cast of people who get into it, like Doug and Allison. And so it's just wonderful how he leveraged his work. So collaboration was very deep into everything that he did. So thank you. Now we're going to go with, I'm going to see if Greg has fixed the audios. Then we're going to go to Fika, and then anybody else who wants to offer any comments. And then we're going to have very brief closing thoughts about looking forward. So Joe, Maritza, Joe, and I will be talking about what we expect from the series just for 2-3 minutes, and we will end with a poetry reading by David and Maritza. All right, Greg, can you do one more try? Nope. Okay, so then let's go to Fika. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing your name correct.
Yes, hello, it's Paika. Sorry, my voice is a little bit gone. I haven't been feeling very well, but hello, everyone. I didn't know CJ personally, but nevertheless, the loss of a thinking mind is always a great loss. So I'm here to offer my condolences to all of you, and especially my wonderful friend Joe. And I wish you all health, I wish you all peace, and I wish you all strength in continuing what CJ has started. From what I hear, is a wonderful project, and I am looking forward to see more of that coming. Thank you very much. And also, I would love to offer my condolences to his loved one, his family. This was a horrible times for everyone to go through, and hopefully from here on, everyone would be going through healing, and wonderful days would be ahead. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Faika. Now we're going to talk about, we're going to look forward. We're going to start with Maritza, Joe, and me. So Maritza, what do you think about what are you looking forward to in the series that we are putting together?
I'm looking at getting a better foundational idea of Bucky. I'm really looking forward to the people who CJ viewed as experts in the field, to having them come and share with us bits of their knowledge. I think that will be really a treat for all of us, and to me specifically, because I consider myself to be, novice in Buckminster Fuller. So I think it'll be a great learning and growing opportunity. And as we move forward with the project, I'm also looking forward to integrating some of these ideas with other ideas that we all work with and take forward for our lives.
Thank you, Maritza. Next up is Joe. And Rupali, if you would like to speak for a couple of minutes, you're welcome to do that. I know you guys are driving. So if you would like to do that, go ahead and type ! Joe is next. Joe.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to just integrating CJ's ideas, specifically comprehensivity, and bringing a lot of different Bucky people together. People from the synergetics groups, and people that focus on maybe, like people like Rupali that focus on architecture, and bringing all these kinds of different diverse minds together and really seeing how everything works together as the whole. I think that's where Buckminster Fuller really kind of opened my mind up, is understanding how to look just beyond one tetrahedron and so how to see an entire system. And I think that for me is something that I'm really interested in, because we're going to have so many different individuals with different backgrounds coming that are experts, organizational experts, that are architectural experts, and synergetics experts. I think that this is really going to be an incredible opportunity for us to connect the dots for Buckminster Fuller's thinking, and I think that's what I find to be the most exciting part. We're really going to get the best of everything. So, and we have CJ to thank for that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Rupali, what are you looking forward to in this series?
So Shrikant, you mentioned that when you met CJ and you were interviewing him, he held up Harold Nelson's book, The Design Way, 4 times. Now, Buckminster Fuller talked about using design, looking at nature and designing in harmony with nature. And he gave the timeline of 10 years, for humanity to get there. We're behind on that time schedule. CJ talked about design, and I think now is the time for a design revolution. And these meetups are great because technology has made it possible. There's a silver lining with COVID. We have a great community online that there are no geographical barriers now. People can join from anywhere and share their expertise, have a dialogue. What Buckminster Fuller said was that it's not the politicians or the governments that are going to make the change. but individuals who get together with other individuals, collaborate, and make the world better. So I think these meetups are steps in that direction to make a better world. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. So I want to say a few things very, very briefly. I am really thrilled about this series because it is the most ambitious venture that we have done with 52 Living Ideas. What we are doing is that we are taking deepest of Buckminster Fuller's ideas, and we are trying to make it accessible to everybody. We're also trying to do cross-pollination of Bucky's ideas amongst people. For example, just look at the January lineup. You know, Daniel Friedman is more kind of like technology, lots of different fields. A young person trying to make connections with different ideas. So it's kind of like a polymathic kind of a person. I don't know him well, but that's one person. He's coming from one perspective. Peter Myson has spent a lot of time developing energy, application of Bucky's ideas to energy. Third, Rupali has a base in architecture and she's an educator. That's her background. Then Kirby has really done a deep dive into Bucky's ideas, and he's able to talk about a whole bunch of them and connect all of them. So there are four different kinds of people who would actually not talk to each other that much. And suddenly they're all talking to each other. And I'm sure in the list that CJ has given us, which is about 36 people whom we have not yet approached, there are going to be many, many, many more. And the list is, you know, he's very deliberate in the list that he gave us. He gave that list to us over maybe 4 or 5 weeks. He kept on adding names to it, all of them. And so it's not just like a small subset of Bucky people connected with, let's say, just one of the Bucky organizations. These are deliberately chosen people who apply ideas and who have very different approach. Some of them are Bucky adjacent. They're not Bucky proper. And we're going to have a conversation with all of them. You know, Robert has agreed to do a presentation as well. So we're going to have a very rich dialogue, and we are going to keep spiraling. You know, what we have done is that we have moved the study of the critical path to Wednesdays, our comprehensivist Wednesdays. And what that does is that the basic ideas of Bucky's will study on comprehensivist Wednesdays once a week. So these Sundays will be on just deep exploration of Bucky's ideas. And we have designed a format so that there is an interview with the person followed by a presentation. And the job of the interview, and maybe we'll do an interview after the presentation, the job of the interview, either done by me, Maritza, or Joe, would be to make sure that whatever is being presented and the context is clear to the general audience. So it is a very, very ambitious experiment. And we have got 100 experiments here in a row. Okay, and we will keep learning. I promise you that we'll keep learning from it and we will keep growing. So it's very, very exciting project. And let's see. So please join us again, you know, 52livingideas@gmail.com. Joe, if you could type that in the email address to contact me so that you can start, you know, talking about what presentations you can do, what discussions you can do. If you can think of some other ways we can do something, please go ahead and do that. All right, so we're going to close now with a poem read by David and Maritza.
Maritza, are you ready? We'll both be unmuted and we'll take
I
turns.
am. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because Greg didn't get his audio working, but he wrote this in the comments. My audio is down, but I'd like to remind everyone of CJ's work in conjunction with the Humanist Society. Most importantly, he orchestrated the opportunity for so many people to share their ideas, and that is the most important aspect of the Meetup experience, where his work was an example for us all, whether presenter or participant. It was an example of what can be done when you believe in your life's meaning. And Andrea, who I wish said this with her own mic on, but wrote this important comment as a long-term member of our group in Philadelphia. Just a few comments. As many of you know, I live much of the year now in Arizona. I started coming to the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society before the pandemic, back when we met in person at Starbucks in the Phoenix, the Pioneer Building, she calls it, or Classic Cake. And I can never be in Love Park without staring longingly at the Pioneer Building and thinking of Saturdays and Sundays around the table at Starbucks, and then going to Asia and the Parkway afterwards. This is our habit. I found I had met my tribe. I felt I'd met my tribe. I belong to a couple of similar groups now in Arizona, although GPTS is the best. I will miss CJ's gleeful intellect, but I know that his spirit lives on. So she's had a very articulate thing to tell us. And what we're going to do to end up is a CJ mix-up with his respect for experts of all kinds and cultures and the world's great documents and ideas and literature. And things that I discovered about him yesterday, that he was a mad dancer and has been a dancer for a long time. He allowed us room in a very non-religious context for us to hear religious language and allow it to be taken seriously without theological issues entangling the point. So to end this in a quasi-formal way with a benediction, which is good words, is all it is, a consolation. This is the context is a Middle Eastern tribal leader who has gone through tremendous personal strife, but he's a singer. So he writes a song of his grief and consolation. So it's the 23rd Psalm with two simultaneous translations, the 400-year-old St. James Elizabethan English, which many people use to, and one that I have made, still working on yesterday. So we'll put them together in a little canto. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
The ultimate nature of the universe guides me to what sustains me. I shall find what I need.
He maketh me to lie down in green pastures.
Brought to the experience of beautiful and plentiful surroundings.
He leadeth me beside the still waters.
I am led to the deep well of serenity.
He restoreth my soul.
These bring back my strength.
He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake.
I constantly pursue the perfections which I yearn for in myself.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
Even seeing that the separation of life from death is as thin as a shadow.
I will fear no evil, for thou art with me.
I am not afraid, even now.
Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me.
All of the support and caring comfort me.
Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies.
Even confronting evil, I am overwhelmed by the presence of so many who care for me.
Thou anointest my head with oil.
This is a gift beyond value.
My cup runneth over.
My cup runs over.
Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life.
Yes, with much to be done and much to be enjoyed, these acts filling the days of my life.
And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
I am and will be rich with love. I remember and celebrate this truth always.
Thank you, CJ, and thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Shakan, very much.